We start. Now for the brain, we have the top part of the brain, this entire top is the cerebrum. And on the cerebrum, you can see the four lobes, frontal lobe, your parietal lobe, your temporal lobe, and your occipital lobe in the back. So frontal, parietal, occipital, and then temporal is on the side. And you see these little bumps on the brain? These bumps are called gyri. And in between the bump, the depression in between are called sulci. And now for the exam, they usually want you to know twist sulci. Now if from the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe, in between we have the central sulcus, is this one. And then on the side, next to the temporal lobe, we have the lateral sulcus. And between the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe, we have the parieto-occipital sulcus. Now, once you see the central sulcus, in front of it, these little bumps in front will be the pre-central gyrus, and behind will be the post-central gyrus. And for the fissures, we have two fissures. Longitudinal fissure is the long one, and the transverse fissure is that one. Longitudinal fissure, transverse fissure. And now the longitudinal fissure separates the brain into two cerebral hemispheres. This one is the left cerebral hemisphere, and this one is the right cerebral hemisphere. And both hemispheres are connected by this structure right here, we see it, called the corpus callosum. And below the corpus callosum, we have the septum pellucidum. And after the septum pellucidum, this part will be the fornix. And after the fornix, we have the thalamus. And this little bump on the thalamus will be this bump will be the intermediate mass of the thalamus. On the book, they also call it interthalamic adhesion. And after that, in front is the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus controls this gland called the pituitary gland. Now, the pituitary gland is connected to the hypothalamus by this structure called the infundibulum. And now, behind the thalamus, we have this gland called the pineal gland. Right? And then after that, the whole structure will be the brainstem. And on the brainstem, we have the midbrain, the top, pons, and the bottom will be the medulla oblongata. Then after the medulla oblongata, we have the spinal cord. And behind the midbrain, we have the corpora quadrigerminal. This part. Now on top of it, remember, on top of the corpora quadrigerminal, you can see the gland is in the back. Now in front of the gland, the pineal gland, we have the posterior commissure. And in front, closer to the frontal lobe, this will be the anterior commissure. Posterior commissure, anterior commissure. And now, this entire structure will be the cerebellum. Good. And the lines on the cerebellum are called folia. And now this part that separates the cerebellum in half is called the vermis. Now inside of the cerebellum, you see the white structure. This will be the arbor vitae. Nice. Arbor vitae, the tree of life. That's the other name for it. And then for the nerves, bye. You're welcome. For the nerves, we have the 12 cranial nerves. You want to make a separate video because this might be bad. Good. Mm-hmm. So for the 12 cranial nerve, the first one, if they say to name the nerve, this will be the olfactory nerve. Why do you need that? And on the olfactory nerve, they point to the top, and this name the structure. This will be the olfactory bulb, and the rest will be the olfactory tract. So if they say name the nerve, olfactory nerve, name the structure, olfactory bulb, name the structure, olfactory tract. Then the second cranial nerve will be the optic nerve. The third one will be the oculomotor nerve. And then number 4 will be the trochlear nerve. Is this one, trochlear nerve. And then number 5, trigeminal nerve. 6 will be abducens nerve. 7 will be facial nerve. 8 will be the vestibulocochlear nerve, or you can call it auditory nerve to make it easier. And then 9 will be the glossopharyngeal nerve. 10, vagus. 11 accessory, and 12 will be hypoglossal. So these are the 12 cranial nerves. Now these two are the spinal nerves, or you can say cervical nerves. And that's it.
Nerves, you wanna like know them already? Tell me.
Huh?
Okay.
And for the spinal cord, and these two structures is the same thing. So on the spinal cord, the outer part of it would be the white matter, and the same thing, white matter on the outside, and this part inside will be the gray matter. Same thing right here, gray matter. And on the white matter, the small section of the of the white matter, the anterior part, we have the anterior column, lateral column, and posterior column in the back. And this big gap in front will be the anterior median fissure, and on the back we have the posterior median sulcus. And now for the gray matter, the section of it, we have the anterior horn, lateral horn, and then posterior horn. And in between this connection is called the gray commissure. And at the center of the gray commissure, this little opening will be the central canal. Got it? And now from the spinal cord, these little roots are called, so the one in the front will be the anterior root. The one in the back will be the posterior roots. Now when the anterior and the posterior roots combine together, they form the spinal nerve. So anterior root, posterior root, but when they are together, spinal nerve. And then this outer layer of the spinal cord will be the pia mater. And that's it.
So you have the two lateral ventricles, right? Then you have the anterior horn, posterior horn, inferior horns. Then where the lateral ventricles meet the third ventricle, which is right here, that's called the interventricular foramen. This hole here is where the interthalamic adhesion is, so that's going to be right here. And then where the third ventricle connects with the fourth ventricle, that's the cerebral aqueduct. And fourth ventricle would be down here where your cerebellum is. And the pink parts are called choroid plexuses.
So for the digestive system, we start with the mouth, right? And inside of the mouth, this space is called the oral cavity. And inside of the oral cavity, we have the tongue, and you have some tooth. Now, this structure that separates the oral cavity from the nasal cavity is called the hard palate. And behind the hard palate, we have the soft palate. At the end of the soft palate will be the uvula. Now, behind this structure will be the pharynx, all of this. The pharynx is divided into three sections. This part that's close to the nose will be the nasopharynx, oropharynx close to the mouth, and then laryngopharynx close to the larynx. So pharynx is the whole thing, nasopharynx, oropharynx, and then laryngopharynx. Next to the laryngopharynx, we have this structure called the epiglottis. So once you swallow food, the epiglottis is closed to prevent the food from going to your lungs. So the food goes to this tube called the esophagus. And then below the esophagus, there's two set of muscles called the cardiac sphincter, or you can call it lower esophageal sphincter. And then once this sphincter opens, the food goes into the stomach, which is this entire structure. And on the stomach, we have this region next to the cardiac sphincter called the cardiac region. And then this region right here will be the fundus. And this middle region will be the body. And then this next region will be the pylorus. Now inside of the stomach, these structures, these lines, are called rugae. Now these curves on the stomach will be the greater curvature. The one inside will be the lesser curvature. Now at the end of the pylorus, we have these two muscles called pyloric sphincter. Then after the pyloric sphincter, the food goes to the small intestine, all of this. On the small intestine, the first part of it will be the duodenum. Then after the duodenum, they split this in half. The first half will be the jejunum, and the rest will be the ileum. Right? So duodenum, and then jejunum, and then the rest will be ileum. And then at the end of the ileum, we have this structure called the ileocecal valve. This one. And then after the ileocecal valve, we have the large intestine. All of this. And on the large intestine, we have the cecum. And below the cecum, we have the appendix. And on top of the cecum, this part that's going up will be the ascending colon, transverse colon, the one that's missing, and then descending colon. Then after the descending colon, we have the sigmoid colon. This curve right here, sigmoid colon. Then on the large intestine, these little pouches are called hastras, and the line between the hastras are called tinea coli. And then at the end of the sigmoid colon, we have the rectum. After the rectum is the anal canal, and then the anus. Then around the anal canal, we have the internal anal sphincters, and then the one on the outside will be the external anal sphincter. And then this is still considered part of the digestive system too, the liver. Then below the liver, we have the gallbladder. Now at the end of the gallbladder, I don't know if you can see it, you see this little green line? It will be the cystic duct. And then this one that's coming from the right lobe of the liver will be the right hepatic duct. And this one will be the left hepatic duct. Now when the right and the left hepatic duct combine, they form the common hepatic duct. Then the common hepatic duct combine with the cystic duct to form the common bile duct that goes all the way down to here. And then below the stomach we have the pancreas, all of this. And inside of the pancreas we have the pancreatic duct, the right thing inside. Now when the bile duct combine with the pancreatic duct, you see when they join together?
That's the bile duct.
That's it. So this is the pancreatic duct, and this is the common bile duct, good? And then when they join with the pancreatic duct, they form the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Hepatopancreatic ampulla, and around the hepatopancreatic ampulla, the muscle will be the hepatopancreatic sphincter. And that's it. The small intestine, we have these layers, right? From here down to here will be the mucosa, all of this. Then after the mucosa, we have the submucosa. And after the submucosa, the muscularis externa. After the muscularis externa, this layer will be the serosa. And then these blood vessels are called capillary network. And this white structure will be the lacteal. Then for the cells on this structure, we have the goblet cells. And the red one will be the Paneth cells. Paneth cells, and then goblet cells. And now for this structure, these nerves right here will be the submucosal nerve plexus, and these will be the myenteric nerve plexus. That's it. And these structure by itself are called villi. Villus. One is villus, and all of them is villi. Microvilli, you can really see it on
That's
this.
a enterocyte.
Yeah.
So this two
That's it?
enterocyte, right?
Enterocyte,
Same thing.
yeah, same thing.
That's all?
For the kidneys, right? This structure right here will be inside of the kidneys, right? This is what you find inside when you open the kidney, these two. The outer layer of the kidney will be the renal capsule. This brownish color, renal capsule. And when you open the kidney, we have two regions inside. The outer region will be the renal cortex. This part right here. And then the inner region will be the renal medulla. Inside of the renal medulla, see this red structure? These will be the renal pyramids. And in between the pyramids, we have the renal columns. So the region is the renal medulla. The structures in the renal medulla, renal pyramids, and the renal columns. And at the end of each renal pyramids, we have these called the renal papilla. Renal papilla. And then at the end of the renal papilla, these structures are called minor calyx. When the minor calyx combine together, they form the major calyx. Then after the major calyx, we have the renal pelvis. And from the renal pelvis, the urine will go to the ureter, which is this one. And then inside is the same structure, right? So this is the renal pyramid right here. The renal cortex is on top, and then the renal papilla. And these white structure inside, these are the nephrons. And on the nephron, we have the glomerular capsule. And at the end of the glomerular capsule, we have the proximal convoluted tubule. And then this leads you to the nephron loop or loop of Henle. It's the same thing. And at the end of the nephron loop, we have the distal convoluted tubule. And the distal convoluted tubule is connected to the collecting duct. And inside of the glomerular capsule, we have the glomerulus. Well, you can see it better on this glomerular capsule. And inside of it is the glomerulus, which is this one. And let me put this together, right? This is the glomerulus. And at the end of the glomerular capsule is the proximal tubule. And this is the distal tubule. Now, this part that's carried the blood in the glomerular capsule will be the afferent arteriole. And this part that leaves the glomerular capsule will be the efferent arteriole. And on the afferent arteriole, we have these cells called the juxta glomerular cells. And on the distal convoluted tubule, we have the macula densa cells. Right? And on the glomerulus, the cells on the glomerulus are called podocytes. These little cells right here on the glomerulus, podocytes. And that's it. Let's start with the muscles, right? So on top, this muscle that controls the eyelid, this one on top will be the superior levator palpebrae, right? And then right under the superior levator palpebrae, we have this muscle that controls the eyeball, will be the superior rectus. And on the lateral side, we have the lateral rectus. Towards the medial side, we have the medial rectus. And at the bottom is the inferior rectus. So in total, we have 4 rectus muscles: superior rectus, lateral rectus, medial rectus, and then inferior rectus. And for the obliques, we have 2 obliques only. On top is the superior oblique, and at the bottom is the inferior oblique. Right? And then on this structure, you can see the lacrimal glands. And inside of the lacrimal gland, we have these little lines called the lacrimal ducts. And then on the corner of the eyes, since this is the lateral side, this is going to be the lateral canthus, and the medial side is the medial canthus. Inside of the medial canthus, we have this structure called the lacrimal caruncle. And after the lacrimal caruncle, we have these 2 openings called the lacrimal punctum. The lacrimal punctum leads you to this canal called the lacrimal canal or lacrimal canaliculi. That's another name for it. So if this is be specific for these will be the superior lacrimal canal, inferior lacrimal canal. And the lacrimal canals goes to this structure called the lacrimal sac. And the lacrimal sac goes into the nose to form the nasolacrimal duct. Okay? And on the back of this structure, we have the conjunctiva, and the yellow structures are some glands called tarsal glands. Okay? And after this, we have the layers, the 3 layers. The first one will be the sclera, and under the sclera we have the choroid, and under the choroid we have the retina. Okay? So 3 layers: sclera, choroid, and then retina. On the retina, you have this structure called the optic disc. The optic disc leads you to the nerve called the optic nerve, right here. And this structure of the optic nerve will be the optic chiasma. Next to the optic disc, you see a circle and a dot in the middle of it, right? So the circle will be the macula lutea, and the dot inside of the circle will be the fovea centralis. Good. And
This also goes to the nerve, optic nerve.
optic disc, yes. You see how it goes?
So, no, I mean the other one.
No, doesn't go to the nerve.
Oh,
This one
okay.
goes to the nerve. The
Okay.
disc, you see how they are connected to?
Oh, yeah.
Goes to the nerve. And then right here we have the iris. In the middle of the iris, we have the pupil. And behind the iris, we have the structure called the lens. And the lens is sitting on this jelly fluid called the vitreous humor. Good. And the vitreous humor is located inside of the posterior cavity of the eye. And then from the iris to the cornea, there's a space called the anterior cavity. Inside of the anterior cavity, there's another type of fluid called the aqueous humor. Good. So for the aqueous humor, then I'm gonna ask for it on the exam. And now behind we have this structure called the ciliary body. This brownish ciliary body, number 18. And this is still part of the retina. And this part that separates the ciliary body from the retina, you see this line, will be the ora serrata. Good. And that's pretty much it.
I'll see you tomorrow, guys.
No
Thank
problem.
you so
Good
much.
luck. Yes.
Thank you.
Will be the auricle. And then this opening will be the external auditory meatus that leads you to the auditory canal. And then the auditory canal leads you to the tympanic membrane.
Tomorrow, maybe.
And the space where you find the tympanic membrane will be the tympanic cavity. Now behind the tympanic membrane we have the eustachian tube. This tube, eustachian tube. And on top of the eustachian tube you have the tensor tympani muscle. Now go back to the tympanic membrane. On top of it we have this bone that touches the membrane, you see it?
Yeah.
This will be the malleolus. And next to the malleolus we have the ancus. And then the ancus will be connected to this tiny bone called the stapes. Right? Now when you remove the stapes, the empty space that you see will be the oval window. And next to the oval, the round one will be the round window. And now this structure, these little circular structures represent the semicircular canal. And on the exam, this will be specific. This will be anterior semicircular canal, posterior semicircular canal, and lateral semicircular canal. And at the end of each semicircular canal, we have these bumps called ampulla. The bumps at the end, ampulla. And the junction of the three semicircular canal, this junction will be the vestibule. Vestibule, right? Now inside of the vestibule, we have these two structures. The one on top is the utricle. Below we have the saccule. And then from the utricle and the saccule, we have the endolymphatic duct. At the end of it is the endolymphatic sac. Good. And now the nerve that's coming from the vestibule will be this one, called the vestibular nerve. And then after the vestibule, we have this structure called the cochlea. And from the cochlea, we have the cochlear nerve. Now when the vestibular nerve and the cochlear nerve combine together, they form the vestibulocochlear nerve. Right? Now inside of the cochlea, we have these openings. So for the openings, they use this model to test it. So the big opening you see will be the vestibular, scala vestibuli, or you can call it vestibular duct. And then next to it is the scala tympani, or tympanic duct. And then the one in the middle will be the scala media, or you can call it cochlear duct. Now, sometimes they ask you for the fluid that goes inside of these openings. For the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani, the fluid that goes inside of both will be perilymph. And for the scala media, the fluid will be endolymph. Right? Now, next to the scala vestibuli, we have the vestibular membrane. And then this entire organ in the middle will be the organ of Corti. Now, inside of the organ of Corti, this structure will be the tectorial membrane. We have the basilar membrane, right? And then in between, we have the hair cell. And then these are the supporting cells, right? And then this pink color that you see in this model will be the membranous labyrinth. And the outer structure, this bony looking structure will be the bony labyrinth. Good. Then after that, at the end, we have these little collection of somas called spiral ganglion. Spiral ganglion. And then from that, we have the cochlear nerve. Good. And then that's it. You ready? So this outer, this structure, bone structure that you see inside will be the testes. And on top of the testes, we have this structure right here called the epididymis. And on the epididymis, if they say be specific, this part will be the head, this middle part will be the body, and at the end we have the tail. head of the epididymis, body of the epididymis, and tail of the epididymis, right? And this structure are located inside of this sac called the scrotum. Good. Now at the end of the epididymis, you see this yellow line that going up. That goes all the way up to here, right? This will be the vas deferens, or you can call it ductus deferens. And then all of these structures are located inside of these little cord called the spermatic cord. All of this spermatic cord. And then let's put this together. So let's follow the vas deferens. Follow the vas deferens all the way up. Now this section of the vas deferens is called the ampulla of vas deferens. And now below the ampulla of the vas deferens we have the seminal vesicle. And remember, the seminal vesicle is located behind the urinary bladder, which is this urinary bladder. And inside of the urinary bladder we have the Wugase, is lining. And then this triangular structure inside of it will be the trigone. Got it? And now below the urinary bladder we have the prostate gland, which is this. And inside of the prostate gland we have a small duct called the ejaculatory duct. And then at the end of the urinary bladder there's a long canal that carry the urine out from the bladder. Let me use this one. This canal will be the urethra, right? It's the same thing on both sides, right? And then just remember this part is the ejaculatory duct, right? Now depends on the location. Below the prostate gland we have another gland called the bulbourethral gland. Good. And then now, so sometimes on the exam they has to be specific about the urethra. So on the urethra we have 3 sections, right? Now right next to the prostate gland, this section of the urethra will be the prostatic urethra. So prostate gland, prostatic urethra, right? Now next to the bulbourethral gland, we have this one called the membranous urethra. And then after that we have this structure called the corpus spongiosum, right? And next to it will be the spongy urethra. And then on top of the corpus spongiosum, this little one that looks like squared will be the corpus cavernosa or corpora cavernosa. And then this structure is the same thing at the end. You see it? Corpus spongiosum, all of this, and then this segmented ones will be the corpora cavernosa. And then at the end, this whole structure will be the penis. And this part of the penis will be the shaft. And then we have the prepuce. And then on top we have the glans penis. And the opening will be this is the urethra. And then the opening at the end will be the external orifice. Okay. So the other part of the female reproductive system, we can see the labia majors. And inside, when you open it, let's put it this way. And then next to the labia major, you can see the labia minor. That's part of it. And on the back side, you can see the anus. And this will be the anal canal. And this leads you to the rectum, right? Now, around the anal canal, we have these muscles. The inner ones will be the internal anal sphincter. The outer one will be the external anal sphincter, right? Now, in front, we have the urethra. If you follow the urethra leads you to the urinary bladder. And inside of the urinary bladder, you can see the Wugase, this little lining inside of the bladder. And then, now in the middle, we can see that's the vagina right here. In front of the vagina, we have this membrane called the hymen. And now around this, you see this muscle that wraps around? This will be the urogenital diaphragm muscle. Good. Now let's follow the vagina. The vagina leads you to this structure called the fornix. And on the fornix we have 2 specific parts of it. Closer to the bladder will be the anterior fornix, and close to the rectum will be the posterior fornix. And after the fornix, we have this structure called before that we have this called the cervix. And on the cervix we have the cervical canal, the space inside of the cervix. And at the end of the space, the opening will be the external os. os, and then internal os. And then the space in between these two os is called cervical canal. This will be the cervix. Then after the cervix, we have the uterus. And on the uterus, we have two main sections, right? The fundus will be this part. And then the middle part will be the body. And then inside of the uterus, we have 3 layers. This inner layer will be the endometrium. The middle layer, where you see the muscles, will be the myometrium. And the outer layer will be the perimetrium. Good. And now all the way inside, you can see the ovary. And from the ovary, you see this yellow connection that goes to the uterus. Will be the ovarian ligament. So ovarian ligament. And then on top of the ovary, we have the fallopian tube, which is this. And on the fallopian tube, these finger-looking structures will be the fimbriae.
The what?
Fimbriae. The finger-looking structures, fimbriae. And on top, we have the infundibulum. Right? So fimbriae and fundibulum, but the whole thing is the fallopian tube. Good? And then all of these structure right here that you see, all of these will be the broad ligament. And then right here, next to the fallopian tube, we have the round ligament. You see number 14? You see with the round ligament. And on the back, this grayish blue color will be the suspensory ligament. Good? And that's it. Alright, for the skin, we have the 3 layers. The first layer on top that you see will be the epidermis. And then the second layer will be the dermis. And then after the dermis, we have this layer called the hypodermis. And then on the hypodermis, we have these yellow fatty tissues called adipose tissue, the yellow. And then I'll go back to the dermis. On the dermis, we have these structure called dermopapilla. And on the dermopapilla, these touch receptors are called Meissner corpuscle. And then the pressure sensor on the hypodermis will be this one called the Pacinian's corpuscle. Now on the dermis, we also have the sweat glands. For the sweat glands, we have 2 types of sweat glands. These are considered eccrine sweat glands, and this will be the apocrine sweat gland. Then after that, we have the sebaceous gland, and this will be the hair follicle. And next to the hair follicles, we have these muscles called erector pili muscle. Good, and that's it. Reproductive system.
This side is for the what?
For the male. And the whole process to make the sperm is called spermatogenesis. And then on the spermatogenesis, the first phase that you see on this model will be prophase 1. Then we have metaphase 1, anaphase 1, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, and then this will be telophase 2. And that's it for the phase. Now on the exam, they asked to name for the cell. This will be the spermatogonium, primary spermatocyte. This will be secondary spermatocytes, and these will be spermatids, and these are spermatozoa. And that's it for the male. And now for the female, the whole process is the oogenesis. This part right here, oogenesis. Right? And then the first phase will be prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, anaphase 2, telophase 2. And now if they ask for the cell, oogonium, primary oocyte, secondary oocyte, and then ovum. And now this one is when the ovum and the sperm join together, they form this cell called the zygote. Good. And then on this, we have these 2 structures called primary polar body, and this will be secondary polar body. Primary, secondary polar body.
Only this part?
Yes.
This no.
No. It's primary polar body, and then when this goes away, and then the second comes, secondary polar body. Early prophase, and then prophase 1, metaphase 1. Then metaphase 1 is about to split, we have anaphase 1. Now when it splits, for these 2, You can either call it prophase 2 or telophase 1. So prophase 2, after prophase 2 again, we go back to metaphase 2, anaphase 2, and then telophase 2. And that's it.
That's it?
Once again, from the top.
Early prophase, prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and then this one you can either call it telophase 1 or prophase 2.
And they will accept
They
either
will
one.
accept either one. And then after prophase 2, remember you go back to the metaphase 2 again, anaphase 2, and then telophase 2.